Today we're going to be focusing on c-betting in position with a stack size around 20 to 25 big blinds. We're going to be mainly focusing on 5 to 6-handed, and of course, even though the ICM impact is relatively small, we're still going to consider the ICM impact. We're going to be focusing on ace-high boards and king-high boards, Broadway boards, monotone boards, low monotone boards and high monotone boards, dry middling boards, middling connected boards, and low boards. So as you can see, we're going to be covering a wide variety range of boards, and I want to show you certain patterns that will help you understand why we should be c-betting very wide on one board texture and we shouldn't be c-betting a lot on a different board texture. And our goal is always to simplify, and the way we're trying to accomplish is that we are categorizing into 3 different types of boards. A board that is almost a range bet, so we c-bet 90 to 100%, a high frequency c-bet board, which is 70-90%, and a low frequency c-bet board, which is between 50 and 70%. If you're able to categorize each board that you see by determining whether it's a range bet board or it's a high frequency c-bet board or low frequency c-bet board, you're going to be crushing the games. And this is totally sufficient. It's not your duty to try to learn frequencies by heart. Oh my God, this King 5-3 board, we need to c-bet 89% of the time. This is bullshit. I mean, there are billions of different scenarios with different stack sizes and ICM pressure. So we want to simplify as much as possible. And your goal should be trying to understand why we apply certain strategies on certain board textures. Remember, it's about learning smart, not hard. And we're going to be using cutoff versus big blind ranges as an example. I will of course also show you the preflop ranges I am working with. But according to my studies, I've seen that the differences, let's say we play button versus big blind or we play EP versus big blind, are not usually that big. Of course, I will do some remarks as we go through the content. You will see a lot of small c-betting, and one of the reasons is of course caused by the fact that with 20 to 25 big blinds, people are reshoving a lot of their strong hands, ace king, ace queen, ace jack, a lot of pairs. So on many board textures, they're not going to have sets, they're not going to have strong top pairs or not even over pairs. So this of course significantly increases our c-betting frequency, and this has an impact on every single board texture. This is, for example, different, let's say, when you play tournaments with 50 big blinds, where you will also just calling 8s, 9s, or even sometimes jacks, and not going to be 3-betting those hands, or ace queen, so your range is going to be overall much stronger. And essentially you will also have all the low pairs, cutoff versus big blind. Most people just reshove all pairs pre-flop. As I said, the ICM pressure is relatively low. The risk premium is around 4% as a quick, but you also learn that in the ICM section. So if you don't understand what I'm talking about, go to the ICM section. But just as a quick recap, risk premium, we need 4% more equity considering ICM than in a CPV model. So let's say we face an all-in. According to CPV, we need 38% equity. Now with ICM, we need 42%. However, there of course also 5-handed. So let's say you won a stack against someone and the other stack chipped up also significantly, maybe didn't bust the other player, but he won like, I don't know, 15 big blinds, and now you have 35 big blinds and the other guy has also 25 big blinds and everyone else has 15 big blinds. So these very unusual scenarios where the chips are distributed in a way towards 2 stacks and the other stacks have rather small stacks, which can already happen at 5-handed, which is very unlikely. Then of course you need to take into consideration that the risk premium between the two of you is going to be significantly higher, probably 6, 7, 8%. And this of course will also impact your strategy quite a lot. Let's dive into ace and king high boards. And we're going to be working also a bit with Pio. So I'm going to show you the the solution. Very often ace high and king high boards, we're going to range bet, and we're going to start with an ace 8 4 board. We open a range like this from the cutoff, which is around 27%, which is quite reasonable. Can be looser, can be tighter, adjustments to your like, what kind of, depending on the players that are sitting behind. The big blind is defending something like this. Sometimes people are reshoving these king, queen, king, jack suited, maybe it's 3-betting some of the suited connectors, suited aces, 3-betting some of these off-suited kings. It's very random. So I try to pick some certain frequencies for 3-betting from each of these hand categories: off-suited aces, off-suited kings, suited connectors, and suited aces. I would assume most people would just reshove these lower pocket pairs, but here I do consider a few pocket pairs just calling pre-flop. But apart from that, I think it's very realistic, and it will not have such a huge impact on our post-flop strategy. So if you want to adjust it and you say, no, people are going to be 3-betting more suited aces, and you eradicate the off-suited kings from the 3-betting range, that's totally fine. You will see this has almost zero impact on our post-flop strategy. As we assumed, we're going to be c-betting with an incredibly wide range. And as you can see here, I also consider the ICM structure, and as you can see, we c-bet our entire range. I don't want to spend too much time on these range bet boards because we want to keep it as simple as possible. And as you can see, the main surprise is that you want to be c-betting quite large. Why do we want to c-bet quite large here? And let's take a look at a head like, let's take a look at ace 10 in spades, for example. I mean, you can see that the difference between betting and checking is quite high, and therefore we should always be betting and not trying to play fancy. So first of all, we have a huge equity advantage, and this is what I meant earlier. You have 65% equity and you want to push that on the flop. So the opposition player has only 35 and he has a lot of really weak holdings. So by betting big, you first of all take advantage of your strong range. You make him fold some king highs he would be folding, which have very low equity anyway. So it's not going to be the case that you're going to be putting a lot of money into the pot. But for your value hands, you charge a lot of weaker hands. Any 8, a lot of 4x, and you can see against the big bet, 2/3 pot here, by the way, people are supposed to start folding a 4, which I think most people won't in reality. And even some low frequency folds with an 8. So this is not even according to theory, but I think it's also a great exploit at the tables to size up quite big. You can also size big with your big flush draws. The only adjustment I would make is I would bet my weaker flush draws small, because, and that's where the practice is different than theory. As you can see, against the large sizing, there's almost no raising range. But this is not going to happen. There will be a raising range. So the most powerful approach in these spots is bet big with your value hands, and bet small with your weaker flush draws, so you can also call a check raise. Or take a check back. That's not too bad either. As you can see, because you might wonder about Ben, as you can see in the bottom right corner here, the EV of 9-7 in diamonds, checking would be 2.6 and betting 2.8. But in reality, checking is going to be having a higher EV, or let's say betting is going to have a lower EV, so the gap is going to be smaller because you will face more check raises. And this hurts the EV of betting with 9-7 in diamonds because we can't stack off on the flop. We're dominated by better draws and we don't have the needed equity against his value hands. So for that reason, very important to keep that in mind. You can literally play your hand strength, right? So if you think, all right, ace deuce, yeah, would also be fine as a small bet. But the main approach, the main pattern you can see here is stay away from this always 1/3 bet. Whatever you have, you bet, because even if we bet 15% pot, we have 40% equity. If we bet 1/3 pot, we have 53% fold equity. And if we bet pot, we get him to fold so many king highs. So this is where our bluffs really benefit from these large sizings. And your opponent in theory can't really do anything against it because our range is so strong. So ace high boards here, range bet, clear equity advantage. Villain has too many auto folds, and that's important. If we look at the equity distribution, look at our range. Apart from 9-7, 10-7, Jack-7, we have always more than 40% equity. Whereas the out of position player, he has a lot of these 15%, 20% equity hands. And this is what we're attacking with our bluffs. However, he still has a lot of these 35 to 40% equity hands that by betting big, we also additionally target. And that's why we slightly gain a higher EV by bluffing here with also larger sizing. If you want to even take it one step further and play extremely exploitative, which is really powerful, is you bet your value hands big and you bet your bluffs a little smaller. Of course, I don't know what limits you're playing on. High stakes sit and goes I wouldn't necessarily recommend, because this is a very transparent strategy. But on lower and mid stakes, where the pools are insane and you play against recreational player, this is the superior strategy. It sounds very fishy and it sounds super exploitative, and you think you might be unbalanced, but they're not going to exploit that. And I'm doing that on low and mid stakes if I play tournaments, even in certain high stakes situations. I'm still doing that and works well. I'm even telling people that, and not many are exploiting that. And I'm still doing quite well in poker. And also, this is of course now a flush draw board. So here we get the additional benefit of protecting. We generate more fold equity against better hands, against king highs and second and third pairs. And you also build a pot when hitting your hand, especially with flush draws. And let's see. I mean, you see it already that the weaker flush draws definitely also sometimes want to bet smaller, and the stronger flush draws, almost full frequency, always want to bet big, because you give your opponent the opportunity to just check jam. I mean, if we bet 38, we don't have all in here. I mean, they should always raise, but of course, yeah, and we play very, very straightforward here. We're going to be raising a lot on the flop directly. Simply because our opponent is, apart from ace 8 and ace 4, he doesn't really have a lot of value hands, and he's gonna have more likely a draw. So if we have ace jack or ace 10 and he raises us, we just want to jam, because if we have an ace, it's super unlikely that our opponent has ace 8, right? And he never has 8s, he never has 4s, I mean, with a low frequency. So you want to play it very straightforward here. Size big with strong flush draws and use weaker flush draws to raise or shove, and gain immediate fold equity with ace size on king high boards, of course, and weaker pairs on king high boards. We're gonna look into that as well. Let's compare. Let's compare that with a rainbow ace high board. Some of you might ask, okay, how does it look if your opponent connects with the board much better? So his middling range on an ace high board, and the most predominant board that I can think of would be ace 10-9, where your opponent has a lot of gutters and draws. So let's have a look into that. How does it change? Maybe ask yourself, do we still going to be c-betting a lot? Are we going to start implementing a checking back range? And this is where the main benefits of these videos will come from, that we're going to compare board textures and you will understand how the different board textures impact your strategy. So once again, ace 10-9, this time rainbow. Here we go again. Mainly c-betting everything. This time less big betting, still 40% of the time we're going to be betting 2/3 pot, but most of the time we're going to be betting 1/3 pot. Why are we c-betting this board with 100% of the time when your opponent connects much better? Well, this time, keep that in mind, it also impacts our range, because Queen Jack on this board is much stronger than on the previous board. King Queen, King Jack, not only has it is it a King High hand, but it also has an additional gut shot. Also, we have a lot more 10x in our open raising range than an 8 or 4, and also a 9. So we're going to have more bottom pairs, we're going to have more second pairs. So as you can see here, we even have more equity now. So yes, there are going to be a lot of board textures where you might think, oh, it connects much better with my opponent's range. In fact, it's actually connecting even better with your own range, which incentivizes you to bet even more. I mean, now 7-6 is literally the worst hand we can have. Here. Queen Jack is strong enough to stack off. Your opponent might fast play Jack 8 or 7-8. And then you still have all the ace highs. And since the board provides your opponent a lot more pairs, you still want to be betting very, very big. Like ace king, if your opponent folds a queen 8, it's not too bad either. If he calls a big bet, we don't mind either. But if you constantly bet small, you don't force your opponent to make any mistakes at all. He can just call his Jack 7 and he's not doing a mistake. So you're giving EV away and you're not leveraging the huge equity advantage you have. So a hand like Jack 7, of course, here wants to call most of the time with a backdoor flush draw. But if you bet big, if you bet 2/3 pot, you can see you get him to fold, which is, let's say, if you have King 5, is a huge outcome. And your opponent is going to have more of these hands. Let's say he has 9-7 or a 9-4, right? So especially against regulars, against other regulars, if you play against another solid player and you face a big bet and you have 9-5, you're probably going to fold, right? But of course, the other players usually do it for value and they don't really understand what to do, even though they're regulars and they just play their hand strength. But here you can really gain an edge over other regulars as well. Against the recreational, I would play super exploitative and just bluff small. We can see betting King 6 suited small generates a small profit. So I'm just betting for protection here and that's it. Just to get him fold his Jack 3 in spades or whatever. And that's totally enough. We still have an overcard. Sometimes we get to win with King High when it checks down against the scutters. We're not going to be super printing with King 6. It's King High on Ace High board, right? But it's important to not make big blunders and to make use of your strong range advantage against good opponents as well, because they understand to a certain degree what is going on. But if you constantly bet 1/3, you're not really abusing the strength of your range, and that's key. Check raising and how to continue against check raise is something we're going to cover also in a different video. For now, just let's focus on c-betting in position. Let's take a King High board. Let's start with King Jack 7. Same ranges. As you can see, range bet. All right, King Jack 7 diamonds. We bet everything. Same principle here. We have 65% equity against 35. And this will also eradicate a lot of your doubts when you're in game, when you have, what am I supposed to do here with Queen 8 suited? Your opponent can have something and so on and so forth. But you know it's going to be a profitable bet. And your opponent cannot exploit you because you have a shit ton. Look at that shit ton of hands you can continue against the race. You don't need to be afraid to bet fold your ace 8 off. Ace 8 off, we bet. Yes, so many people think, oh, I have ace high. Ace high always wants to check back and balance your check back range and you can call turns or whatever, all this bullshit. No, it depends on the board texture. And here ace 8 is strong enough to c-bet. What do we accomplish by betting 1/3 on this board? Well, first of all, we get to fold all these bottom crap that can pick up a pair. Right? We don't mind folding out 6-5 off. That has 6 outs against our ace 8 off. We don't mind folding out Queen 8 off. Of course, he's not folding anything if he has a gutter, but we also only invest 1/3. And we can still, especially if the ace and diamonds, against good regs, against good opponents, we can turn our hand into a bluff and then second pair and make him a fold a jack or a 7. So you see the principle here. Every street has to take into consideration how good the board or the card that is being dealt on the turn or river, how does it impact our range and our opponent's range. And in general, rainbow boards are always better. A flush draw board always provides more hands to play back for the out of position player, because he's going to calling a lot of suited hands, and he's also going to have a lot of more like backdoor flush draw type of hands. And as you can see here, King Jack 7 rainbow wants to bet more often big than on a flush draw board, because you can bluff more, you're gonna have more fold equity, 65% here and 61% here. All right. So since your opponent has less hands to defend with, and his calling range is kind of defined, you want to take advantage of it. So let's say if your opponent has King 3, he's going to calling regardless, and you want to take advantage of that with your King Queen. And you also want to increase your bluffing frequency because your opponent has less hands to defend with. And on a flush draw board, also your opponent is going to have, let's say, more higher equity hands. So a hand like Jack X and diamonds is flipping against your King Queen, right? So also he's going to have more stronger combo draws, Queen 9, Queen 10, 8, 9, all these sorts of hands. Also, yes, we're not going to have these on the rainbow board for our range as well, but since our range is so strong anyway, it doesn't really matter. We still have so many sets, 2 pairs and top pairs, that we don't really care. Plus, we don't have this trash here as the out of position player. And you can see that a hand like Ace King here on the rainbow board has 86%, whereas on the bottom board it has only 83%, because in opponent's range they're going to be the hands that are not pairs. He has additionally with, let's say, 8-4, he has a flush draw, right? So that's something you can always keep in mind, that additionally on the rainbow board you're supposed to be even more aggressive and also using more often larger sizings. So don't confuse that just because it's a flush draw board. I mean, we still bet big, right? As you can see here, a lot of the King X want to still bet big, and I make it very exploitative. So I'm not looking at, oh, King Jack suited, 20% of the time we want to bet big, and 80% of the time we want to bet 1/3. That's not how I approach it. The way I approach it is, I have a good hand, a very good hand, and is my opponent likely to pay me off 3 streets with a weak hand? Yes, then I try to put in as much money as possible. Because again, against the small sizing, your opponents are supposed to be raising very, very wide, which is not happening. So your bluffs are not suffering facing check raises because it's not happening as often as in theory. So of course, if you bet always small and you never have it, he's going to be printing with his check raises. But if he's only going to be check raising 8% of the time, it doesn't really hurt us. In fact, we're actually going to make more money because we're going to face less check raises. And then we actually want to shift towards bluffing small and betting big with our value hands. But again, here it's about learning the core understanding of how to play these boards. And you get a lot of freedom for playing these boards as the in-position player. You can bet a lot of small, you can use a lot of big bets as well. It doesn't really matter. Broadway boards. I mean, this should be very self-explaining. It's a different kind of board, but no matter if it's Queen 10-9, Queen Jack 10, King Queen, whatever, as we've seen on this Broadway board here, King Jack 7, massive equity advantage. 66 to 34, c-bet your entire range, huge equity advantage, also use large sizings. And now you wonder, okay, what is the point of betting, for example, ace deuce to ace 6 so big here? Well, this is always something that I find personally very interesting. So the way you want to approach it and also start understanding how poker works in these spots is to compare the outcomes of the two strategies. So let's say we bet 1/3, what do we accomplish? So if we bought the two main strategies would be betting 15% pot, so almost min bet. Why is this such a strong strategy? Again, if we bet 15% pot, what is your opponent going to do with 10-6 off, Queen-6 off, 9-4 suited? He can't really do anything, right? So also he's going to be calling all these middling hands. 9-7, of course. He's going to be calling the gutters, I guess. Yeah, Queen-9, Queen-10, of course. 9-8 off, 10-8 off, right? So Ace-8, Ace-7, as you see, doesn't really want to bet that big because it blocks a lot of the hands we're targeting. But with Ace-6, Ace-Deuce, you have one additional overcard to the king, so you bomb your outs clean. So if you hit an ace, it's safe to say that you're going to have the best hand. And if you bet small, your opponent is still calling Ace-9, Ace-8, maybe he has an Ace-10. And if you hit your ace, you can have some really bad reverse implied odds. If you bet big, and if we see, it actually generates a lot of EV. So let's say we bet 2/3 pot, you see that we get to start to folding them out, 9-8, 10-8, Jack-9. And what are you going to do with your, not Jack-9, sorry, 10-8, 9-8 off? All these hands here, we generate more fold equity. And this is the basic principle behind every bet. There's a question that you need to answer. What are you trying to accomplish? And here, by not having a 7, 8, or 9 in our hand, we first of all fold him out better aces, Ace-6, Ace-8, and Ace-9 in case he would have it in his range. So it would even much be better to bet those. Plus, as you can see, there's, apart from Ace-7, not a single ace in his range, so we also bomb our outs free. So if we have an ace, we're probably going to have 90% equity and more. But if you check back or you bet small and you hit your ace, you can still be dominated. Plus, it has the additional merits of folding out these middling hands that you don't block. Start attacking 7x. I think it also works really well against regulars. So this is a strategy I would apply against regulars, because in recreational, yeah, I think he's still calling any 7. He's still calling a lot of the gut shots. So, or he's still probably calling any Queen-9. So against recreationals, I would probably just bet 1/3. It's still going to be a profitable bet. But against regulars, it would be a superior strategy to bet big. And I think it's not unlikely that they're going to be folding any 7x. This might seem very counterintuitive, but this is a common pattern if you have an additional overcard that you want to be bluffing those bottom Ace-X, and on different board textures it's with King-X. So let's look into... Yeah, as a note, versus Rex, bet your value hands big and c-bet small with your bluffs. It's a very simple exploit. Let's look into monotone boards. And we start with monotone low board. 8-6-4. As you can already see, high c-bet frequency, but now we have to consider some checkbacks. Out of position player is not supposed to lead. We're gonna have some board textures later on where your opponent, where we are supposed to lead as your position player. You can't really see a pattern here. It's more like a frequency. That means that, again, every single bet or every single hand itself would be a profitable bet, because if we look into our opponent's response, we still have a decent amount of fold equity. However, you can see it already here. Remember earlier on the ace high boards and Broadway boards where we had up to 50% fold equity? Since 8-6-4 and our opponent is going to have a lot of gutters, pairs, flush draws, we're gonna have way less fold equity. Also, and this is why you should definitely on these low mono boards, you should definitely be very careful with c-betting and definitely add some checks, because if you bet for it because you think, he's gonna have 10-3 in hearts and all these kind of hands and king 9 off without a club, well, according to theory here, he's not supposed to be raising a lot of his flush draws, as you can see. He's supposed to be slow playing them a lot of the time, which I think is not going to happen. Also his flush draws, right? If we take the ace-x in clubs, you see actually calling very, very often. Only the ones with the gutter are raising. King eye flush draws, king eye flushes, queen eye flushes, they're all calling. So you're gonna face more check raises in reality because that's how people play. And that means that actually in reality, we might just only want to be c-betting 70%. So if we have a good king queen, if we have a good ace queen, we actually want to be checking back. Checking back nut flushes is actually a pretty viable strategy as well. So on this kind of very dynamic board, yes, you might lose some EV on the flop itself, but if your opponent has jack 10 in hearts and he hits a jack because you check back, you're going to win a much bigger pot. So it kind of equalizes each other, that you are going to lose EV on the flop by not betting from hands that would call, but you gain EV by letting your opponent hit a hand, especially with hands that are not vulnerable. If you have, let's say, a jack 9 in club, and you'd unblock all the queen and king high clubs, I would always bet. Plus, your opponent can start bluffing randomly and overplay his flop made hands because he thinks, you're always going to be on ace high, you're not going to have a flush. So it does make sense on these lower boards to also incorporate some checkbacks with nut flushes, or if you have aces with the without a club, you want to be checking back anyway, because if we bet aces and we face a raise and we call, and then our opponent bets again, or let's say he goes all in. Okay, yeah, with the ace and clubs. But if we wouldn't have the ace and clubs, we would have to fold. Yeah, okay, that makes sense. If we bet, we face a raise. We call. And he goes all in. Yeah, it's like aces is basically a break-even call here. So, and the way population plays, you can just fold it. However, on these mono boards, be a little bit more, and you won't see really a pattern here. You don't, as we have seen previously, remember this board where we can see patterns. All right, these kind of hands we want to bet big, our gutters we want to bet big, our strong top pairs we want to bet big, and these lower pairs here. Same principle with the ace-x, targeting all these middling hands that can't call against a big bet. However, here we don't really see a pattern. So that means you can really make it player dependent. And in general, I would just try to once in a while to check back. This sounds like a very stupid advice, but that's how it is. To not always bet fold your ace-10 in hearts. And understanding this is simply not your board. If we look at the equities, 52, even though we have all the overpairs. So low mono boards are essentially, and it's not that they always happen, but it's good to know for you. If it's 8 high mono board, 9 high mono board, 10 high mono board, and everything lower, you have to be more careful. Yeah, almost even equity distribution, and you get very susceptible against check raises when you do c-bet every single time. And as I said, partly give up with random overcards and partly c-bet, very player dependent. Yeah, versus fish, I would definitely strive to check back more often, since they will also just check jam their king 8, which is a no-brainer check call, or they're going to be check jamming their 10-6 because they don't know what to do. And this really hurts your EV of betting, to be honest. Yeah, 1/4 pot here, just attacking the auto folds. Let's look into the very small sizing. You can see that ace-9, ace-10, even though, or ace-9 here, yeah, probably then if our opponent has ace-10 as well, they're even calling without a club, and we probably get more around 20% forward equity instead of 90% forward, 15% forward equity. So actually, the very small 1/4 pot bet is doing a fantastic job here. Big sizing is, yeah, I think is bad as a bluff, because against the big size, our opponent is not supposed to raise, and this is definitely not happening in reality. So the big sizing, I think, is quite bad, and I would mainly bet big with my value hands. Let's look into monotone high card boards, King 7-3 and spades. Question to you, what changes now? How does it now impact your range? Maybe take a little pause for 10-15 seconds, think about it, pause the video, and then try to come up with an answer. Now you've seen several board textures and how it impacts our strategy, and now it's back to you to assess how it impacts this very board. And now suddenly we can range bet. So by changing essentially the 8 to a king, I mean 8-7-3 is almost the same as, what did we just have? 8-4-6, right? So just changing one card pumps it up to a range bet for us. And the main sizing, small. Because now we get 30% forward equity with betting, I think it's 15% pot size. So here, 15 to 25% pot size is the superior strategy. And if you have King 10, King Jack, King Queen, I mean here again, if I play against someone, Pyro says you can bet big, you can bet very small, you can bet middle. Everything has its advantages and everything has a disadvantage. And I want you to stay away from this results-oriented thinking where, let's say you bet small with your king, queen, and this guy calls with his, let's say, 4-5 in hearts, just a pure gut shot, and he hits his 6. And then you're going to be like, oh, I should have bet big. No, actually, it's good when he bets his 4-5. And these are outcomes you can't know. Right? You didn't know that this guy is a freaking calling station. Next time you do it better. Sometimes we don't have access to the information, and it's your fucking responsibility not to freak out about it. And if you play against an unknown and you decide to bet small, look at the EVs. Look at the EVs of king, queen, and hearts. This is 0.0 something. This is stupid to worry about this, but sometimes you make a decision that will lead to a complete different outcome. And sometimes you make a decision that will lead to an outcome where you get his entire stack, right? So do yourself one favor and don't freak out about these GTO solutions that provide you frequencies for different actions. You can't know everything, and that's totally fine. But of course, if you know that this guy is a calling station, you already tagged him as a fish and you have already seen showdowns, I go for a 2/3 pot here on the flop. If the turn is good, I continue value betting, and if it's a clean run out, like a blank run out, or even if it's one middle card, but it's not going to be the 4th spade, I'm going to be value shoving the river. I don't care. All right? So keep that in mind and don't freak out. So mono high boards, we c-bet our entire range here, mostly with a small sizing. Even the 15% pot size bet, we get him to fold 30% of the time. Again, here ace-9 off is in there, even without a spade, and probably even ace-10 off without a spade would be calling quite often. Let's see something else. Ace-8 even sometimes calling. So I think in reality we probably get him to fold 30 to like 35% equity. Range bet, 15 and 33% pot size bet. Very high equity advantage here. Again, the king index much better with our range. Even though on 8 high, that's the point. People think, oh, we have all the overpairs. But the problem is if it's 3 low cards, it's much better for the other position player. Yeah, and here you can see the comparison on the 8-6-4 board, we had only 15% fold equity, and now we have 30% fold equity, almost twice as much. Let's continue with dry middling boards, 8-7-4, and to your surprise, now this is actually a board where we want to be start leading, since we're going to have more nutted hands than the in position player in terms of the absolute nutted hands. We have the nut straights, we have more two pairs, only the suited combos, and we do have a lot of middle high equity hands. It's really hard for us to miss that board. So even if we have nothing, we're very often going to have a gut shot or at least overcards. So as you can see, there's a lot of very small leading going on. Just 15% pot, but it definitely wants to lead some hands here. Which is very interestingly, keep that in your mind. Maybe intuitively you were doing it already on boards where you know your opponent's going to have a lot of queen jack offs, king jack offs, ace king offs, and you're going to have a lot of these pairs here that connect with this board, and you want to protect against these broadways. Or if you have a bluff that really struggles against check calling, so a hand like queen 5, jack 5 off here is definitely very, very viable as a lead here. However, we focus now on c-betting. As you can see also, we c-bet around 70% of the time, which is already on the verge from high to low frequency c-bet board. But also if we bet 1/3, you see a very high check raising frequency, which is not going to happen in reality. For that reason, I think even c-betting around 80% is totally fine. And let's see. You can see that the stronger ace highs like ace jack, ace queen do want to be checking back with a very high frequency. Also king highs, queen highs, the weaker ones want to be betting, the stronger ones with king queen checking back. Here, same principle, we want to clear out equity. You see king 9, king 8 wants to bet big very, very often. King 8 makes sense, or queen 9, king 9, folding out better king highs, clearing out outs. It's a very common practice. I mean, king 4 is strong enough to check back. We hardly get to fold better hands, but with king 9, 2 overs, back to straight draws, should be pretty obvious that this is a good bluff bet, but also using a bigger sizing to instantaneously fold out king 10, king jack. Let's see what happens against the big bet, and you can see that we start folding out king 10 and king jacks. In fact, king jack off always folds. And I think we even get to fold queen jacks and king queens almost always. So for that reason, in reality, betting big king 9, king 10, queen jack is such a powerful strategy here, especially against regulars. There are not many pairs folding anyway, but people are going to be folding those. So if on these middling boards, whether it's 9-5-6 or it's 7-5-3, you have like 2 overcards with backdoor straight draw, but it's like one of the weaker king highs or queen highs, this should always give you a signal to bet big. And you can apply this knowledge on every kind of these board textures. And this is very important here to draw takeaways so that it'll also help you on other board textures as well. Equity distribution 55-45. So now you can see it gets narrower, and not only the equity distribution, but also the nut advantage shifts more towards the out of position player. So that's why, c-betting only 70 to 80%. Lots of leading from the big blind. This is of course a mistake here. We have a huge amount of unconnected hands like king jack, king queen, ace king. If you face a check raise, you have to fold, but you're still going to be ahead a decent amount of the times, yet it's not good enough or not often enough to justify calling against the raise. So here, remember from post-flop videos from the Sit and Go course, equity protection. 20 to 25 big blind poker very often gets into an equity protection. And here, our goal with a hand like ace jack is simply to try to protect our equity by checking back, not facing a check raise, checking it down and trying to realize our equity. So yeah, 8-7-4 does not interact with these broadways. So let's say the board would be 10-8, and this is maybe as a homework, compare, let's say 10-8-5 with 8-7-4, because now suddenly Queen Jack becomes much better. We're gonna have much pairs. We have more 10x open raising than 8x. Remember earlier on the mono board where we just swapped the king with an 8, and from 70% c betting it went up to 100% c betting. So same here, just by swapping one card, it will have an impact on our c betting range as well. Six, four deuce. Now this is one of the most surprising boards. It was also, in fact, for me, indeed for me. Lots of leading. You can see now that the equity gets closer to 50-50. We barely have top pairs as the imposition player. 8-4 deuce, we at least have some ace 8s, king 8s, queen 8s. But a6, we only have the a6 off suited. We might not even have a6 off, king 6 suited, and we don't really have queen x or jack x, nor do we have 6-5. We shouldn't be opening it. So we are not going to have a lot of pairs at all, like in fact only very little combos. Yes, we have the over pairs, but this doesn't make up for justifying c-betting everything, because an over pair is 6 combos. A hand like king queen off and king queen suited are 16 combos. So you already get to understand how many more unpaired combos we have compared to the paired combos, and in this instance it would be over pairs. So lots of checking back, lots of leading from the small big blind. You see, since he has all these hands that can easily stack off 6-4 suited, even 6-4 off, straights with a very high, all combos of straights. 5-3 off should always be a defend against the min raise, and a lot of gutters and an overcard. So you see here now that he has just these board, like all these bottom hands that we on an ace high board try to attack and to fold them out, now suddenly become extremely strong hands. So he has way more one pair hands that we have that in total are going to allow him to start leading against us. I mean, if we just look into the exact combinations, you see top pair 100 combos, second pair 60 combos, third pair 40 combos. So in total around 200 combos of pairs. And if we go into our range, you see top pair 9 combos, second pair 6 combos, third pair 3 combos. So you already see the distribution of pairs. Yes, not every pair means that it can go broke, but it will justify placing a bet because it has enough equity. And I think this illustrates very well how bad in a predicament the in-position player here actually is. If we look into the c-betting, you see the same pattern again. If you want to pick ace highs, king highs, you see the king highs and queen highs and jack highs here that are a little weaker start betting because they will fold out better ones. Ace highs, yeah, you see that ace king, ace queen, because this is a we get value from weaker ace highs as well. If we bet, this is now basically a pure value bet. So every bet, again, ask yourself, what are you folding out? Or if you bet, are weaker hands calling? And let's say if you bet king queen, king 9 is not really calling, king 8 is not really calling, right? But if you bet ace king, ace queen, some of the ace highs are going to call, right? So you see, if you bet ace high, ace 8, ace 7 is always calling. Of course, the gut shots anyway. But if you bet, let's say, king jack, king 10, you see that king 8s and king 7s, they're supposed to start raising, which might not happen that often as here, but they also start folding. So you're not really benefiting from betting these hands anyway, even though it would be a good bet. I mean, if you look at the EV with king 10, it's not a big blunder, guys. Even if you end up betting king 10 here, I just want you to understand, why does it favor betting king 8, king 9, and not so much king 10, king jack? What's the core principle behind it? Why does it want to bet ace king with such high frequency? Also, with your overpairs, bet big. 10s, 9s, 8s, 7s, extremely strong on this board. You want to put in a big bet. And if you play against recreationals here, I would never check here with aces or kings against recreationals. But against regulars, it would make some sense, right? And now you can even take it further. If you play against opponents that constantly c-bet here, you can run over them with check raising. You can raise king 8s, queen 9s, king 9s, jack 7s, everything, because they will have too many folds with all their broadways. This is a very, very easy and straightforward exploit that you have to make, because they're simply not aware that actually how bad this board is, because they don't sit down and study these boards. So lots of leading here. How much leading is it actually? Yeah, around 40%. C-bet very low frequency, using all different sizings. Biggest bets here with, of course, our vulnerable value hands. And we have too much air that is not connected, would be wasting a lot of equity by bet folding, such as king jack, king 10. Bet your weakest king is in queen x, principle or concept that you now have learned to clean out outs. And yeah, ace king, king queen are almost value c bets. Yeah, let's look into king queen again. Yeah, king queen, I mean, we get some calls from king jack, king 10 if we bet small, so I don't mind betting king queen here either. Checking back middle pair with very high frequency. Let's get into these very dangerous appearing boards, 7, 8, 9. Now you might ask yourself, if we look into it, all right, why were we leading on 6, 7, 4? Sorry, it was 6, 4 deuce. 6, 4 deuce. But why are we not leading on 7, 8, 9? So as you can see, no leading at all, even though he has all the jack 10s, who has way more straights. You can see that we actually get to c-bet more than on the 6, 4 deuce board. Why? Because now if we have 25 big blinds and we have a hand like ace 9 and we bet big, we face a raise, we're not going anywhere. We're just now, I mean, against some opponents I would consider folding, but first we look from theory, and then I will give you some exploitative advice. But as you can see, the 9 high board here interacts with our range also quite well. We have a lot of gutters with overcards. We do have a lot of straight draws. We do have some sets, very strong overpairs here, and also we our opponent still has some auto folds, right? Every single time these offsuited combos, king 5 off and king 5, already 16 combos, and this justifies placing a small bet. And if we have queen jack or king jack, we have a gutter, we have 2 overcards. And yes, raising will happen quite often, as you can see, yet we still c-bet very wide. You see a lot of raises that I think won't happen, jack 3, jack deuce, 10-3, 10-4. I think people are just going to be calling it. Also, these weaker pairs here are not going to be raising. So the raising range is mainly going to be pairs and draws, straights. But I think in reality it will be a little bit lower. So again, if you have a good hand, you should definitely bet big. Against regulars, we see here also the same pattern. With these lower aces, we actually bet quite a lot, right? Which makes some sense, because we unblock a lot of his folding range, especially when we have ace deuce, ace 3. You can see it's the highest low ace x betting frequency. We get to fold ace 4, ace 5. We unblock all the 4x, 5x that are in villain's range. We get to fold king queens. It's only 30%, but again, we only invest 1/3, and we clear out some outs. I mean, if our opponent is, especially if we hit our ace, we're going to have the best 1 pair ace x hand. Yes, our opponent will have some 2 pairs, ace 7, ace 8, and some ace 9s eventually, but apart from that, our ace is almost always clean, right? And since there's already an ace, it's very unlikely that our opponent has ace 8. It's even less likely since there's already an 8, a 7, and a 9 out there. It's pretty straightforward. And apart from that, Let's see if we recognize any other patterns. I would simplify in a way that I check back my middle pairs. I want to check back with a higher frequency my over pairs. I'm going to check back some king tens, queen tens, and then I'm going to be protected. Like, I will hit some kings, I will hit some queens. You don't need to be afraid that you're unbalanced. Like, just a very logical approach of, all right, I check back my second pairs, I check back some weaker draws. I'm going to be betting some draws, especially those ones that are strong enough to go broke. If you have 10-9, if you have 10-8 suited, if you have Jack 10 is just nuts anyway. If you have pocket 10s, pocket jacks, you will have enough hands that also if you bet in the 10 or 6 hits there, you're going to have straights. You can bluff bet with king 5, ace 5, king 6. Let's say I would always bet king 6, because if I face a raise, I'm going to be dead almost always. Like, my opponent is going to have something like 10-9, 10-8, 7-6 himself, and I'm not having that much equity, so keep that in mind. So also on 6-4 deuce, we had 54% equity. Now on 7-8-9, we have 56% equity. So we have 2% more equity because the 9 interacts a little bit better, or in general, this board is a little higher. So the higher the board, the better it is for our range. It's a very, very easy principle. On 6-4 deuce, the in-position player also has more auto folds. On 7-8-9, it's really hard. Let's say if the out-of-position player leads, you see we barely have any hands that can fold. Right? Like, if you lead on 9-8-7, we fold 13% equity. You barely have any fold equity, so you don't want to lead in the first place. On 6-4 deuce, remember, there was way more hands that wanted to fold. High c-bet frequency, lots of strong draws that are strong enough to stack off or to barrel. And yeah, if you look at the check raise frequency once again here, it's just not going to happen. So you can probably even c-bet close to 80-90%. I wouldn't c-bet range, but something close to c-bet range. That's it for c-betting in position on different board textures. I mean, there are a gazillion of different boards, but this will help you to understand what kind of strategy you want to apply on different board textures. In general, always dry boards, even if it's 10-4 deuce rainbow, c-bet very wide, where your opponent has a lot of auto folds. The more the big blind has missed the board, the better it is for you to c-bet. Even if it's a board like 9-3 deuce, or paired boards are always in general very good for you to c-bet. I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and then see you in the next video.